Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Sarah Montague. Norway, Spain and Ireland say they will recognise a Palestinian state from May the 28th. The coordinated announcement has been welcomed by Palestinian leaders, but it sparked fury from Israel, whose foreign minister said the decision sent a message to the world that terrorism pays. Israel Katz said these countries have decided to award a gold medal to the Hamas murderers and rapists. My guest today is Norway's Foreign Minister, Espen Barth Eide. Will his government's move help or hinder the path to peace in the Middle East? Espen Barth Eide, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you, Sarah.
Why has Norway decided to recognise a Palestinian state now?
Well, simply put, because we think it's the right thing to do, and we also think it's the right time to do it. We always wanted to strive towards a two-state solution with the Palestinian state living side by Israel. But until now, we used to think that our bilateral recognition would have to come at the end of a process. But we changed our view, looking at the deplorable situation on the ground, not only everything that has happened over the last 7 months, but also the last years, where no real progress took place. And now we join other countries in saying that we want to lift the status of the Palestinians to have a better balance in the final negotiations with Israel will have to happen at some point. So this is a strong support for a two-state solution, a strong support for the moderate forces, and a strong reminder that there are still people that believe that talking is better than killing, and that a two-state solution can be achieved on the basis of the vision of mutual recognition.
You'll know Israel's foreign minister has said history will remember Spain, Norway and Ireland decided to award a gold medal to the Hamas murderers and rapists who raped teenage girls and burned babies. How do you respond to that?
That I totally and vehemently disagree with his reading of this. We are trying to do the exact opposite. We reacted very strongly to the horrible acts of Hamas on the 7th of October. And we have deplored that in this terrible situation, it has been the extremists and the guns that have been speaking. We think the whole debacle in the Middle East, the violence, the terror in Israel, the extreme response from Israel in Gaza and the settler violence in the West Bank, all combined, just reminds us that we have to get back to the track towards a two-state solution. So this is a handshake to the moderate forces, not to Hamas or the extremists. It's actually the opposite. And we do this not only as bilateral recognition, but also as support to what is now known as the Arab Peace Initiative, which tries to build a regional context around progress towards a Palestinian state, including the recognition with
Mr. Barth Eide, you say it's about peace, but you know Hamas has welcomed this move. They say these successive recognitions are the direct result of this brave resistance and the steadfastness of the Palestinian people. Their political bureau member Bassem Naim has said that, which is why Israel says it rewards terrorism.
Well, but I mean, we know, and you know, and Israel knows that this was also very early welcomed by the Palestinian authorities, by the PLO, by Fatah, by all those forces who actually believe in a Palestinian state living together with Israel. These are the people that we support. And then we also saw that there were some statements from Hamas, but this is actually an anti-Hamas move because we disagree totally with Hamas's program of exterminating Israel. We believe in those Palestinians, those that are currently in charge of the state of Palestine, who believe that the two-state solution is possible. And those are the people we support, and I'm very happy that they came out with rejoicing this decision, as has many other countries done.
You say this is about supporting other Palestinians, but Norway hasn't prescribed Hamas as a terror group, which is as the United Kingdom and the United States have done, has it?
We have said that what happened on the 7th of October is terror, and it is conducted. And when an organization plans, carries out, conducts terror, it is terrorism, absolutely. But Norway does not have a separate list, because Norway believes that speaking even to people you very strongly disagree with is sometimes important. That's why we try to be helpful to release hostages, for instance, and in many cases we have been communicating messages between people who don't speak to each other directly. But this has actually very little to do with this, because our firm support over decades has been to the Palestinian authorities that came out of the PLO's promise, which they have kept, by the way, to lay down arms, to stop the violent struggle, and to work for a peaceful settlement with Israel. That's the Palestine that we recognize.
You talk about communicating. You are in communication with Hamas.
So we communicate between several groups in the Middle East. That's one of Norway's identities. Well, yes, including Hamas, not on political level, but we have exchanged messages, which is quite helpful for those countries who cannot do it themselves, but still want messages to be presented. There are many countries in the world, I don't need to name them, who appreciate that some people actually have these contacts.
And if, as a result of a Palestinian statehood and elections in the future, Hamas were elected, as they have been in the past, Norway would recognize that?
Well, listen, as I was trying to say earlier, there is now an Arab peace initiative which spells out several aspects of what is needed to end up with a peaceful solution. Recognition of Palestine is one of them. Normalization between Israel and Arab states, security guarantees for Israel, demobilization of Hamas and other militant groups is part of that. And this is presented by countries who detest Hamas, who really are worried about the Iranian influence in the region, who want to come back to a situation where you can have normal relations between moderate Arab states and Israel. So this is clearly a part of a process which is very much anti-Hamas. And my experience in the world is that many countries who have seen violence, when eventually political settlements are found, people who used to be labeled as terrorists, then they are re-identifying later as politicians. I cannot preclude that will happen here, just as in Northern Ireland, for instance, or in Spain. But it's an absolute prerequisite that non-state armed groups are demobilizing as when a new state is formed.
One of the difficulties is, and you will, and I imagine you will have known that this would be Israel's reaction, that recognizing a Palestinian state, they say, will lead to more terrorism and more instability in the region and jeopardize any prospects for peace. Do you recognize that?
So I am aware, and I was aware, that Israel would not like this. We are in frequent contact with Israel. We informed them beforehand. We wanted them to know, of course, because we want to be transparent. Norway is a friend of Israel. But we also openly disagree on what this means, because this Israeli government of Benjamin Netanyahu, with the most right-wing Israeli government ever, have not really lifted a finger to move towards a peaceful settlement when they have either allowed or tolerated more illegal settlements with their active contribution to the division between Palestinians. So I think that we are certain that what we are doing is, in our view, the right thing to do, not only for Palestine, but also for the interest of the Israeli people in the long run. Because I believe my Israeli friends, when they tell me that they want to remain a Jewish state and a democratic state. And to be frank, it's very difficult to be both if you don't also solve the Palestinian issue.
As far as Israel is concerned, are you suggesting that this is also about trying to put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu, on the government, for the government to change?
Well, I have noticed it's clearly in the public domain that there are increasing and deep divisions even in the Netanyahu war cabinet, where Some ministers have been saying that continuing a war without a clear idea what will happen after a political outcome is very problematic, and I agree with them. And I think that speaking, if I may also speak as a former defense minister, long before I was foreign minister, that the key rule of the use of military force is that there should always be a political purpose. Just destroying things don't take you anywhere. You need to have an envisaged outcome, and that seems to be lacking in the current strategy, because just exterminating Hamas and believe that terrorism will never come back will simply not work. I think most military experts will agree with that. So you also think about what you do next. And this is what we're trying to contribute to, together with a number of other European states. And I, by the way, believe that other European states will follow this example.
Do you want Benjamin Netanyahu out of Israel's government?
By all means, this is up to the Israeli people to decide. I campaign for my party winning in the Norwegian elections. I allow other people to choose their leaders. But I do recognize that the current government is probably the least two-state solution friendly we've seen in Israel over the last 3 decades. And I can say that because we've been working with all of them since the Oslo Accords and the vision of Isaac Rabin and Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat from '93. There is little left of that in the current situation in Israel. Having said that, I want to say very clearly that I have a deep empathy with the psychological state of mind of many Israelis after the horrible attacks that happened on the 7th of October. I understand that that has brought many people into survival mode. I think the same is happening now on the Gaza Strip, where people are fleeing for their lives from starvation and in a terrible situation. I think at this point, friends of Israel, who are also friends of Palestine, need to try to think clearly when that is not necessarily happening on the ground. Okay. And that is what we are trying to do in this context.
But you will know that your actions will unite Israelis around their Prime Minister. It will be less likely that he will be ousted as a result of this.
No, first, I did not say that he should be ousted. That's up to the Israeli people.
But you don't think peace is possible under this government? And if you're after peace, how can you argue that what you have done then is likely to lead to peace?
Well, we think that strengthening the position of the moderate Palestinian hand here of the Palestinian authorities, of the PLO and those legitimate representatives of the Palestinian people will create a new hope that an alternative to violence is possible. That is good for Palestinians. That is good for the Israelis. That is my firm conviction, and we have been working on this for decades from Norway's side, working with a lot of other countries, with many friends and contacts in Israel, in Palestine, and in the region, and this is our view. That view, yes, I know, is different from the view of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and some of the other ministers of the Israeli government. I respect that difference, but I am also open about our disagreements.
Okay. Why now? France's foreign minister has said France does not consider that the conditions have yet been met for this decision to have a real impact on this process, which is why they haven't done what you've done.
So every country has to make its own choice, but we have joined forces here with Spain and Ireland, and I would like to remind you that back in the early 90s, there was a Madrid conference, which was a direct precursor to the later Oslo agreements. So the Madrid-Oslo track was active then, and the two countries who launched that process, which we've later known as Oslo, now want to move forward to lift this to a new level. I know that many European countries are considering this, and I have to say I have been speaking to Stéphane Séjourné, the French foreign minister, about this question. I know they are also considering, but we want, like them, that there should be a context around that. That context is the Arab peace plan, with the increasing support of a number of European states, which sees recognition of Palestine not as a one-off separate thing, because it's absolutely true that on its own it does not solve a single problem, but in the context of regional normalization, of strengthening of the Palestine Authority, of demobilization of Hamas, and all these other elements in the Arab peace plan, we think that that's the context in which this is right. Which is why Spain, Ireland and Norway said that we're not doing it today, we're doing it next week after a set of meetings in Brussels on this very point.
Okay, because things are going to look markedly different next week?
Well, we will have a clearer picture of the developments of this Arab peace plan. And I think that will gradually rally more people to say that we have to get out of this horrible mess, which leads to fear of terrorism in Israel, extreme violence in Gaza, and increasing settler violence. So what clearly does not work is just to continue as we've done till today. We know that we tried that, it didn't work. So let's try something more constructive.
The United States, someone from the White House spokesman has said President Biden believes that a Palestinian state can only be realized through direct negotiation between the parties, not by unilateral decisions. And you have so infuriated Israel that you have alienated the government, have you not? If you pride yourself on being able to talk to the parties involved, they're not going to talk to you now.
Well, let's see. I mean, Israel has said that they will recall their ambassador for consultations. I want to say the ambassador here in Oslo from Israel is somebody we very much appreciate. He's actually the ambassador in Oslo that I have met most frequently. Often had coffee in my office, and when he comes back, he will be offered a new cup of coffee because we want to maintain good relations over time. And then I'm fully aware, I've been around in this game, that one of the keys in the toolbox is to withdraw ambassadors and similar steps, but we will not reciprocate. We want to remain a good friend of Israel, but we are not making our decisions based only on what other people think. We have to do what we think are right, and I think historically this will be proven right. Nobody knows, let me frank, nobody knows, but I think that there is no perfect time in the Middle East, but we have tried the opposite for 3 decades, and it's time now to think outside the box.
Your ambassador in Israel will be called in, and Israel has made clear that all 3 ambassadors will be shown a video of what happened on October the 7th. Will your ambassador go along to that and watch that video?
Well, first, I do not really recognize that he'd been called because he offered to come. We called first because he wanted to set up a meeting to explain our position. So that's actually the opposite of being called, but he will be there, absolutely. And we are all extremely aware of the horrors of 7th of October. I think we have all seen gruesome images, and we are in total solidarity with the Israeli people who have suffered the most terrible attack on Jews since Holocaust that happened that day. Just as we are in solidarity with all the 35,000+ Gazans who have been killed and hundreds of people who killed on the West Bank. We think that this is a horrible cycle of violence. Mothers losing their babies and family members in all these places. And we really want to get out of that violence. That is in the interest of Israel and the interest of Palestine.
And in terms of when you talk about getting out of the violence, do you think that the outside world can impose a 2-state solution on Israel and the Palestinians?
Well, you know, when Israel was set up, by the way, with very strong support from Norway. Norway was one of the early recognized for Israel, and this happened in the UN. It was a very strong statement of support for the idea of an Israel, a Jewish state in the Middle East. There was a premise for that all the time, that there should also be a solution to the Palestinian question, and that has been an unfinished business. So at that time, in many ways, this was imposed, the establishment of Israel, on the region by the UN, and it was correct. We supported it. I do think that there is work that has to be done to complete this long story after all these decades of non-solution. We tried the pure negotiated route. We still believe in negotiations, but we think that lifting the status of the moderate Palestinians, the Palestine authorities, will be helpful as we move forward. I know that there are more than one view on that, but that is our view. It's a view we shared with an increasing number of European states and with 143 other states on the planet. This is what the UN majority thinks, and I think that the majority in this case is right.
And therefore, what you would urge the United Kingdom, the United States, other countries to recognise the Palestinian statehood And what, by doing so, you think that'll make peace more likely?
So in principle, yes. And I have noticed that Foreign Minister David Cameron, quite early after he took up his tenure, said that the UK is not any longer limited by recognizing at the end of a process, which is exactly what we also have said. We know that they're not doing it now. We respect that. We also understand, because we work very closely with the United States of America and the Biden administration, that sometimes there are constraints in American politics that the rest of us have to respect. And they're in the middle of an election campaign. There are deep divisions over Palestine and Israel in U.S. policy. It's not easy to be the U.S. I have the deepest respect for that.
Right.
But that cannot mean that the rest of us cannot continue to work.
And if the Israeli Prime Minister came to Norway, would you arrest him, given the potential arrest warrant from...
Well, I mean, this is a very hypothetical question because the court, the International Criminal Court, has not yet made an arrest warrant. What has happened so far is that the chief prosecutor have requested that. So we respect the independence of the court, but just like the United Kingdom and like actually almost all Western countries, we are a signatory to every state in the EU, all NATO countries beside Turkey and the US, and most of other US allies are members of the International Criminal Court. We are obliged to do what the court decides. So that's not a political question, that's a legal certainty.
Ultimately, is this not about the Palestinians? It's about the Israelis. It's about putting pressure on the Israelis because the Israeli government is not keen on a two-state solution.
This is in support of all those that believe that it is possible to have a two-state solution, that the two-state solution requires Palestine that is able to live beside Israel, help provide security guarantees for Israel, and that can be embedded in regional peace. So it's support of all people who believe in that, and it's a clear message to all people that the solution to every question is violence.
And can you imagine a peaceful solution under the current Prime Minister of Israel?
Well, I have to be respectful of what he says. I mean, he's been very clear that he does not want a two-state solution. I remember speaking to him 10 years ago when he was very clearly in favor of a two-state solution. I even had a long interview with him in Davos on stage, which is on record, where he very clearly says that the only solution here is a two-state solution. He has changed his positions. And so it does not seem likely that the current government in Israel is going to take the lead on this. But this is also one of the reasons this message is being sent now, because Israel is there for the long haul. We will forever support the state of Israel, and that does not mean that we cannot be in disagreement with governments there and here and in the UK and everywhere. Governments go and go. But the states remain, and these policies are for the long run.
Just briefly, finally, isn't a two-state solution further away than it has ever been?
I think, if you asked me a year ago, frankly, I would say yes, it's very far away. We were close to giving up on the whole Oslo idea. Today, I would say the opposite. I actually think that having followed what almost all countries, led by the US, Arabs, Europeans, Africa, Latin America, Asia, the whole planet, entire G20 is saying the only solution is a two-state solution. I think that's for real. I work now closely with a number of Arab countries who always had that view, but now I think they are working much more systematically to achieve that.
Espen, Barth, Eide, thank you for coming on Hard Talk.